So the next campaign that we should be getting should be the download campaign. This will be sometime in April. And we get a bunch of stuff like a free SSR ticket, login bonuses, limited missions, and a whole bunch of other stuff, including summon campaigns. So there is that. But, you know, the reason why we're here is for the free SSR ticket. To be able to get this ticket, you need to have cleared Orleans. So you can pick a temporary 5-star servant. You have to take note of that. It is temporary. To make them permanent, they have to be First Ascension and then Bond 5. If you don't do that within the time limit, which is, let's see, till June. So that's like 2 months. May, June, yeah. You have 2 months. So you should be able to get it. No problem. You can get it on day 1. You have to get to First Ascension and then Bond level 5. This is the list that we have to deal with. So if there are specific servants that you'd like to go for, go ahead. Like, whatever you feel that will make you happy, that should probably be your first choice. But if you're having some difficulty on choosing who to go for, this is what this stream/video will be about. So we'll be going through each class, and then I will give my recommendation of each class. And of course, like, we'll start with the Saber classes, which is actually the easiest for me to describe because I do have all 3. So I have Mordred, who I got last year, Altera, who I got year 1, and OG Artoria, who I got, like, she's my first SSR because I re-rolled for her. This may be a biased opinion, but my recommendation, they all play very similarly. They're all AoE and they're all Buster. For Sabers, I would recommend Artoria because once Anniversary arrives, she gets her Mana Burst upgrade, which will be upgraded from Mana Burst to Dragon Core. Not only will it increase Buster card effectiveness, but it will also increase NP damage, and then it will also turn all of her other face cards into Busters. So if, for example, if she has, let's say, an Arts card and a Quick card in as the face cards on your deck for your turn, it'll change into Buster. So I highly recommend Artoria because of that. While Altera and Mordred are also fairly powerful, I feel like Altera may need a buff to have like an NP charge to make her comparable to the other two. And then with Mordred, I mean, Mordred plays kind of similarly to Artoria. She's just a bit more selfish because she doesn't have a charisma skill which buffs the party. She mostly buffs herself. But then again, you know, Mordred is getting a costume in the Apocrypha rerun, which is, if you've seen the anime, she basically gets her casual outfit, which is a very nice looking costume. So there is also that to consider. But for Sabers, my recommendation would definitely be OG Artoria, Saber. Now for the archers. The only one I have here is Arjuna, but I feel like Napoleon would probably be the best option to choose if you do need an archer. The reason why I say that is because of his charge skill on his third. Usually I would prioritize servants with charge skills because it makes firing off their NP easier and faster to do so. So he has a 30% charge. He will ignore invincibility and gain crit stars all in one turn. And he also has other useful skills where it increases NP party damage for 1 turn, crit star generation for 1 turn, and then his first skill is a charisma buff. And then he'll increase his own attack even more by 20%. Now, if I were to compare him to Arjuna is also kind of okay because he does, where is that? He also has a charge. It's just that his charge is a 25% charge. This is a very weird percentage. This is also the same issue I have with Karna. They're at 25%. I feel like it's in a space where the 5% is either wasted or lacking. So if you need 20% charge, the 5% is wasted. If you need 30% charge, you're lacking 5%. So it's that kind of situation. Arjuna kind of falls behind when it comes to when you're comparing him to Napoleon. He did get a buff though, where it charges his NP gauge every turn for 5 turns. But rarely would you find yourself in a situation where you would need that with Arjuna. I didn't talk about Orion much because unfortunately Orion had like even certain 4-stars unfortunately outperforms Orion Archer or Artemis to make things less confusing, unfortunately. So I see very little reason to summon for Artemis. Because everyone has Uriel, as chat mentions. Uriel would pretty much has the same niche as Artemis, where they're effective against males. It would be easier to level up Uriel instead of Artemis, and Uriel would still outperform Artemis, unfortunately. So there is that. Since Uriel is a 3-star, you can get her to NP5 very easily, while Artemis is a 5-star, and Gotcha luck will have to determine on how many NP levels you're able to get for Artemis. And now we arrive to the Lancers. So for the Lancers, we have Enkidu, Karna, and Bradamante. Okay, we'll start with Karna first. Arjuna has that 25% charge. Karna has the same problem. While the skill does have crit star drop rate increase and increased crit strength, I kind of find it odd with the 25% chargers. And there are not that many in the game, and unfortunately Karna is one of them. And I also kind of hate Karna because he spooked me when I was trying to roll for Jolter. So there may be some bias there. That being said, Karna does have a... Oh, I didn't unlock Karna's new skin because I don't really like the new skin. Costume, etc. He is a very strong unit. I just don't like the 25% charge. Now, as for Enkidu, Enkidu is a really solid single-target Lancer. Enkidu has really good survivability. Yeah, he has a hard survivability on the second skill with the evade. And then not only that, but if you're getting low on health, Enkidu's heal practically heals 10,000 HP at level 10. So it's kind of hard to ignore that. So for challenge content, Enkidu would really perform very well. Now, as for Bradamante, it's hard for me to kind of recommend Bradamante. In terms of looping, she kind of has a bit of difficulty looping. She's very... I mean, she's not that... It's not that Bradamante is bad. Bradamante is not bad. It's just that, well, we can go through her skills. She has quick performance, arts performance. That's great, sure. She has guts, increased defense, so she has a survivability. And then she charges her NP gauge by 20%. She is an AoE quick Lancer. And unfortunately, she has a hard time looping. You can loop with her, but you'd have to kind of force it. So you'd be in a situation where you're using double Scotty and then plug suit, Waiver. Usually you'd end up in that situation. And there are times that even with that, she can still kind of fail a loop depending on the enemy, what kind of enemy you're facing, whether they're higher HP or so. Kind of hard for me to recommend her for farming, since later on in the year you have alternatives in the arts meta. So it's kind of hard for me to recommend Bradamante really. So if ever from any of the Lancers, I would recommend Enkidu as my pick if you were to choose a Lancer. Enkidu would be my recommendation. Of course, let me also say this. It would depend on what you need, whether you would need single target or AoE. Normally, I would say try to get one AoE, one single target of each class, so it would really depend on what you would need. Of course, if you want to see some booty here and there, you could go with Bradamante. But yeah, my overall recommendation would be Enkidu. Now, for the Rider classes, this is probably the class where I have the least amount of knowledge with, because for the longest time, I haven't had a 5-star Rider aside from Maid Alter. Ozzy did eventually spook me in one of the banners, but I have not used him at all. Nor have I wanted to use him. I'm not saying that he's bad. It's just that I usually have other go-tos. But if I were to recommend a rider, I would recommend either Achilles or Drake. It would really be more of a pick your poison kind of deal. Whenever I go through my support list, it's usually Achilles or Drake that I see on my support list. I rarely see Europa on support list. And then when you look at, let's say, Francis Drake, if I were to compare the two, since they're both busters, I'd go with Drake. And then her NP charge is a 50% charge. It's kind of hard to ignore the difference between... It's kind of hard to ignore the 20% difference, since Europa only has 30% charge while Drake is 50%. So that alone already makes me want to pick Drake over Europa. Although she did get an NP upgrade, so it kind of does more damage, 400%. So there's also that. It just doesn't have the buster performance that the overcharge effect of Europa has. Instead, it gives crit stars. But still, I feel like I would pick Drake over Europa any day. And then as for Achilles, he's a really good quick looper. He has the skills that helps him actually perform quick looping very consistently. He has a quick performance on his first skill, and then his third skill has NP gain, a 30% NP gain, and then a 30% charge. Although the NP gain is only one turn, but I feel like it'll be enough. And another thing is that his quick performance is increased with his overcharge. So that's another thing that helps him be able to loop very consistently. So quick looping for Achilles is very easy. And of course, he has a solid defense skill. So he has a solid survival skill, since his invincibility is for 2 attacks for 5 turns. So depending on your luck, Achilles can survive for quite a while and then increase his own defense for 3 turns after the fact. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. Achilles and Drake. I don't really want to talk about Ozzy, but if you're a JoJo fan, you go for Ozzy. Easy enough. I mean, he did get a buff where he gets additional buffs whenever he's in a sun battlefield. His NP did get a buff, but the problem is you'd have to cast the NP first and then use his attack buff. The problem with that is, I mean, you'd want to use his buff before using the NP, but the thing is, you need to use the NP first to get the Sunlight Battlefield, which will grant you the buffs. So that's kind of annoying with Ozzy. Now for casters. Okay. This is like the easiest choice you'll ever make. If you don't have Waiver, that's who you go for. If you have Waiver but you don't have Tamamo, that's your second choice. If you have Waiver and Tamamo but you don't have Sansang, that is your third choice. Pretty much, if you're gonna be using the 5-star ticket, usually you'd try to get one of those 3. It's I mean, of course, you could use it for waifu reasons, like what I did. I ignored my own advice to pick Waiver, and because I don't have Waiver in JP, but I ended up getting OG Artoria with the ticket anyway. So I'm like, but I don't regret it, of course. You know, always go for waifu first. Or at least, always go with a character that you definitely want. That should always be your first pick. But if you're going with this ticket and you need a meta unit, Waiver would be your go-to. If you already have Waiver, go Tamamo. If you already have those two, you go with Sansang. Now, why Waiver? For those of you who are not familiar, Waiver can pretty much hard carry your account because his skills are just so very good. What's very important is the amount of charge he grants to the party. So for his first skill, it grants 30% charge to a target member of the party. So that's 30% charge. And then he grants 10% charge to the party on his second skill and third skills. So that's already 20% charge to the party. So in other words, one servant is guaranteed 50% charge from Waiver skills. Waiver is just a very, very useful unit. And his skill cooldowns are very short. So if you're going for those long survival challenge quests, Waiver is also a recommended person that you can bring into the party. Because not only do his skills give the 50% charge, his NP is also very useful, especially when facing off challenge quests, where let's say you need to you need to reduce the charge on an enemy, or else they'll fire off an NP, or maybe even get lucky and get a chance to inflict stun on that enemy. So this is a very useful Noble Phantasm. And it also decreases the enemy's defense, so that way your DPS unit can do even more damage. So he has a really useful NP. And then as for Tamamo, a lot of people will say when Caster Artoria released, Tamamo was dead, but I don't believe that. Tamamo just does things very differently. What's nice about Tamamo is that she heals, she reduces turn cooldown, and she pretty much can do some of the things that Caster Artoria can't do. Yeah, Tamamo definitely is catered more towards stall team comps. Like, for example, her first skill reduces the enemy's charge. So if the enemy's going to fire enough an NP, you can delay that by one turn because of her first skill. And then, of course, one problem sometimes when having a caster is that they're usually targeted first. So having a skill that grants her a lot of defense is good for her survivability. And then if you need to buff arts, she has that skill on the third skill. And also it acts as a emergency heal if you need it. Although usually you'd be using it because of the art skill, but her HP restore on her skill is very useful, especially in emergency situations when you don't have her NP up. And the reason why you would like to have her Noble Phantasm up and running is because it reduces your skill cooldowns by 1, has a party-wide healing effect, and also increases NP gauge, which is affected by overcharge for your allies. So it's a very good Noble Phantasm. My third recommendation, which will probably be my choice when I pick the ticket, is to get Sansang. I do have Sansang in JP, and she has gotten me through a lot of content when it regards to like raids, to challenge quests, because as a single target caster, it's hard to deny Sansang because of her first skill, which is an 80% NP charge, which is great. They buffed her second skill recently, so the taunt skill now has an attack buff for Sansang, so that's even more damage. And her third skill works well with her, which is a triple arts, 1 quick, 1 buster card set. So after firing off Sansang's NP, if you have 2 face cards, arts face cards for Sansang, you can pop her third skill for NP gen and get her NP a whole lot faster. Sansang has gotten me through a lot of raids. I mean, I could still get tempted and maybe pick OG Artoria for another NP level for Artoria, but my policy is I always try to get a new servant. Sansang would probably be my go-to choice once this ticket arrives in NA. Now, as for the other two, Scheherazade and Anastasia, it's kind of hard for me to recommend Anastasia and Scheherazade, especially when you compare her to the likes of Sieg, who is a free welfare, who you do have a chance of getting this year during the Apocrypha rerun. Yeah, it's hard for me to recommend Scheherazade and Anastasia, especially when you can get a free 4-star unit that will be NP5 and yet can loop just as, like, if loop better than these two. So it's kind of hard for me to recommend these two. So short version, I would recommend Waiver, Tamamo, and then Sansang in that order, depending on how you have it. Shengong, I will never recommend Shengong. Never. So for assassins, I do have both Osaka Behime, who's more of a support type character. Unfortunately, it's hard to recommend Osaka Behime when you try to compare her to a lot of the other supports. If you compare her to... She does buff quick, so you usually compare her to Scotty. Scotty just performs better. If you compare her with the Buster support, you have Merlin, and then in the future, Koyanskaya. Yeah, it's hard to recommend Osaka Behime when you compare her to those other servants. Now for Jack. Jack is a really solid unit. Jack does a lot of damage to female because of her special attack against female enemies. And not only that, she is a really good quick star generator. So if you need a lot of quick stars, Jack can get that very easily. Now, with regards to her skills, they're not really that great, but I mean, her overall performance in general is still pretty good, considering that she doesn't really have any skills that increases her performance. She does have a quick card effectiveness, but that's only for one turn. But, you know, if I were to pick between the two, since you only have two choices for assassins, I would go with Jack. Now for Berserkers. At this point, it's hard to recommend Berserkers in general, to be honest. Now, as for Vlad, at the state he is now, he underperforms a lot. But later on, as Caster Artoria is released, and he does get a couple of more buffs down the line. When he gets to his latest buff, then you could consider Vlad as an investment if you need a single target Berserker. So I haven't leveled up his skills yet, but once he does get additional buffs, so we have the Legend of Dracula buff, which increases his defense and attack. And then he gets Fearsome Immortal A+, which grants him Gut Status, further grants Gut Status one time for 5 turns, which is stackable, and then NP generation rate for 3 turns. So this is the buff that pretty much made him useful in the arts meta. We don't have this buff yet. We should get it further down the line. Yeah, looking forward to when he gets that buff. And then his NP is buffed twice. Yeah, and it was a weird time. Galatea came, which pretty much was kind of like a better Vlad, and then he gets buffed, which makes him better than Galatea. So it was like kind of weird. Anyways, so we already have the buff, I believe, that gives him crit stars as his overcharge effect. And then when he gets his strengthening, it increases his NP damage from 900% to 1,200, and then adds a reduced arts resistance for 3 turns. So what's good about this is if you're doing a challenge quest content, and yeah, you pretty much bring Vlad, you should be fine. Vlad being Berserker, he can chew through a lot of challenge quests because of the opponent type effectiveness, with his buff to his third skill, he should have no problem looping if he has double caster Artoria to buff him. So in terms of who I would recommend for Berserkers, it would probably be Vlad, although at his current state, it's hard to recommend him, but if you want to consider it as an investment, Vlad would be a good choice if you're looking for a Berserker. Now for the extra class, we have Jeanne d'Arc and Janako. Unfortunately, if there is a character that has died because of caster Artoria, that would be Jeanne d'Arc. Unfortunately, I would have to say. It's hard. I mean, Jeanne d'Arc is great. Her NP grants invulnerability, HP regen, and defense increase. But the thing is, it's kind of hard to deny that because Caster Artoria also has the charge, the NP gain, while Jeanne doesn't really have things that can help the party a lot. Yeah, Jeanne is unfortunately one of the characters that have fallen very hard because of Caster Artoria. Once Caster Artoria releases in the English server, you have her true invulnerability. She's able to 50% charge. It's hard to deny when you compare Caster Artoria to Jeanne d'Arc. Because normally you'd bring Jeanne d'Arc for her NP invulnerability, but you have Caster Artoria, who's able to do that and still buff the party and can do it more consistently. So, yeah. It's hard to recommend Jeanne d'Arc, unfortunately. Now, as for Janako, I honestly don't have much experience using Janako. I don't know if it's luckily or unluckily, but she hasn't spooked me. I kind of find it hard to recommend Janako. I mean, considering like with the number of moon cancers we have versus the number of rulers we have, I feel like, you know, Janako would probably, like, if you're going for an extra class unit, Janako would be the better choice between her and Jeanne. While Janako is a moon cancer, we will be getting another moon cancer this summer. So if you need a moon cancer, you could probably, you know, consider maybe waiting if you are willing to roll for Summer Kiara in the gacha. So, but yeah, it's hard for me to really recommend either Jeanne or Janako. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend any of the extra classes, to be honest. The short version. Each class that I would recommend: the Servant for Saber, Artoria. For Archer, Napoleon. For Lancer, Enkidu. For Rider, it's either Achilles or Drake. For Caster, I would recommend Waiver, Tamamo, and Sansang, in that order. For Assassin, I guess Jack. For Berserker, it would be Vlad as an investment. And then for the extra class, unfortunately, I would recommend not to pick a extra class for this ticket. A lot of people call this ticket the Waiver ticket because pretty much if you don't have a Waiver should be your go-to pick. That is like the easy answer for this 5-star ticket. I remember when, pretty much everybody was saying, "Oh, it's a Waiver ticket. Awesome." But yeah, it's very hard to ignore him. But again, I ended up ignoring him because I went with waifu reasons. So yeah, I mean, you know, take this whole thing. You know, you don't have to follow my recommendations. You know, you could always just go with the waifu choice. But, you know, if you're unsure, and the easiest answer would pretty much be Waiver. But yeah, those are my recommendations for each class if you need a specific class to pick on the ticket. So yeah. But anyways, closing remarks. Everybody in YouTube, thank you for watching. If you reached this point, I have hoped you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one, alright? Bye! So yeah, chat. Yeah, my choice is probably gonna be Sansang.